Welcome to the Glue Pod.
Hosted by Glueckauf.
Can we check in? You kidding me right now?
Get on your phone.
Featuring musicians, hucksters, and some of the shit.
What's going on? Dude, you asking me?
Let's start the show. As a discerning guitarist, you know the road to great tone begins with great components. Our classic design, carefully selected parts, and hand-built approach combine to make an extremely versatile instrument that you will have for life. 2Rock amplifiers. They can be found at 2rock.com with the hyphen in between. That's 2-rock.com. Check it out. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Glue Pod, and I'm honored to have my next guest, Mr. Matt Schofield, on the pod today with me. How you doing, man?
Hey, GK in the house, man. Yeah.
All right, man.
Hi, good to see you, mate.
It's good to see you too. We were just talking off camera about like how long it's been since we've been able to see each other, even despite the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, I moved further up north and made it a bit more of a trek down there, So otherwise it'd have been down Lanyap for a beer at some point.
Absolutely, a beer and a jam, man.
Exactly.
How have you been holding up during the pandemic? I know you've been going hard with True Fire and all that.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, thank goodness for things like True Fire, and it was fortuitous that I started working with them. When was that? In 2018, I did the first thing with them, and obviously with no idea that this was coming, but just with the general sense of like some other income streams would be useful, and so that I, as you know from your experiences on many tours we did together in the years before that, the ups and downs of that. So it was like let's get some other income streams coming in, and just to maybe be able to make better choices about the tours and things, And so that was the reason it started, and they're a really great company to work with. And thank goodness I did, because that's basically carried me through the last year, and other little things like that with, manufacturer gear endorsement deals, things that I get little kickbacks on. So that's been great, and I've discovered that I'm not that much poorer not touring. It paid for itself for 20 years, but so there's been a lot of, I think for all of us, been a lot of revelations in this last year about life and careers in general. We've all had to take a look at the situation, and I've essentially been touring like I'm on a hamster wheel for 20 years, and you keep doing it, and you carry on, and it pays for that to be your life. And occasionally you're up on money, and occasionally I'm down on money from a tour. And so I feel really grateful that I did take the step to doing the True Fire stuff. Not that I want to be a guitar teacher. I mean, that's another thing that this year's really illuminated for me, is what I actually am, which is a concert artist and an improviser, and that is what I can bring. That's the thing that I really bring to the world as best I can, and in not being able to do that, I've really realized that is what I do, and the rest of it is just other stuff. So there's been a lot of illumination about things in general. So I didn't want to be a teacher, but it turns out I'm quite good at it, so I may as well use that. And people seem to really enjoy the courses that I've made. So we've actually done 4 in the last year. So while everybody's saying, dude, when are you putting a new album out? It's like, well, dude, I'm trying to make a living as well,
Yeah, people don't totally understand. It costs money to make a record too. And it doesn't exist in a vacuum, It's like,
no, it doesn't. I'm sorry, I'm bashing my coffee mug.
No, you gotta get that.
Sorry, Diego, to the audio. But Yeah, it's been very illuminating. And aside from that, just to think positively about the pandemic, I haven't slept in the same bed for this long since I lived at my mum's house as a teenager. So to
Totally.
sleep in the same bed, I've made maybe 3 or 4 trips out of town in the last year, and so that's been a big change. Whereas the previous 2 years, I flew to another country, either transatlantic or transpacific, every 11 months out of the 12 for the last 2 years. That's what I did. At least once, sometimes more than that, but at least once a month, I got on a plane and flew across the world somewhere. So it's like big change there. And I've been able to experience being home.
Yeah. That
Actually
must feel
taking some
good.
time off. And that's okay as well. It's like I can't do what I do. My wings are clipped, and I would fly away tomorrow if I could, but I can't. So then let's make the most of this, spending time with Christine. Together. We'd never spent. She managed to get down here for the first 5 months straight of the pandemic, and that was really nice to actually have a life together like that.
Right.
Being okay, well, I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
No, I mean it's like I'm sure I can't even imagine all these years you've been at like living a nomadic lifestyle of sorts, which is
Yeah.
which is what the job requires, and to be able to have this break, it must feel good in a sense. It's like the flip side you were saying of this whole pandemic, the positives
Yeah.
within the negatives of the whole
Yeah.
thing.
And I got this little place in Jupiter in 2017, and it's modest, but it's mine, and it's comfy, and I can go for a walk and a bike ride, and go to the condo pool, and so it's almost been like a forced sabbatical. How I've been viewing this thing,
Yeah.
because otherwise I'd have still just been on the hamster wheel for the last year as well. And but don't get me wrong, if I could head to the airport and go fly to Italy or Japan or wherever, tomorrow, then damn right I'd be doing it. But we can't, so let's make the most of it. And
Do you
and
thi-
you learn doing loads of cooking. Everybody started cooking and stuff.
yeah,
And
man.
so Christine's been killing it with the food, and I've mastered my ultimate steak. And,
That's
you know,
living the
just-
dream.
It is stuff that we just never got around to doing, and doing some work in between. So it's
Do you think
it's
that
kind of cool.
Do you think that when you get back to touring, you're gonna keep doing the courses on the side as supplemental thing and some of the teaching? Because I do feel like, one thing about you, which I guess is kind of rare for players that have, and we'll talk about this later, like kind of how you came to it, and a non-formal, non-institutionalized method of learning normally
Yeah.
aren't great teachers, but actually, and I know maybe you don't even see yourself this way, but I see you this way because I know you've taught me so much. Is like you're a cerebral cat, so you know how to express ideas that may be somewhat abstract as they are with music, but I'm sure people really enjoy these courses and are getting a lot, even despite maybe there's that creative pull for you to want to be on the road, but
Yeah.
there is a creative outlet in expressing these ideas that are in your head, right?
For sure, and it took me a long time to figure out how to teach what I do, So the first time I did it, I remember probably 15 years ago, I got asked to do the blues thing, a week-long camp, in a summer camp for guys at a university, and they sign up, and it's like a residential camp thing. And I went in there thinking I got to be a teacher like everybody else, So okay, so here's the Mixolydian, here's a 2/5, and everybody was just like, and I know it. So that really made me realize for myself, okay, that's not how I play, so it shouldn't be how I teach. But there is something I can offer. And then, I really had to work on it. And I got to give credit to my friend Tomo Fujita, and I did some teaching with him, and he was able to sort of, because he's obviously an incredible teacher and a long time at Berkeley there. That's his job, So being able to reflect upon doing it with him, it made me able to understand what I could bring to it that was unique as a teacher, that people weren't offering, So I wasn't going to sit there and show you just scales, because anybody can show you the scales. So I tried to figure out a way of teaching people how to use them in a way that I was using, and then it's fulfilling for me to do it. So, like I say, it's not the number one thing I want to do, but it's fulfilling, and then it's also honest to how I perceive music, and like you say, it feeds back into my general love for the music that I play and where it comes from, and you start to get into the real human and historical element of this music, and blues is often overlooked in that respect. It's often taken, I really think it's taken for granted. I mean, especially in the country where it's from. You go anywhere else, go down to Cuba, and they have their traditional music, or you go to any other country in the world, and blues is really the traditional music of this country. It's the traditional folk music, born of only this country, and then it taken to the rest of the world. And it's not really treated as that in a lot of ways. I was watching a documentary, and Willie Nelson quoted somebody else who I can't remember, but he said there's only two kinds of music in the United States: the Star Spangled Banner and the blues. And I really thought about that, and I'm like, yeah. And obviously you can dissect that however you want from a historical and social and cultural point of view. But it's and it makes you. I'm like, yeah, shit. Maybe they should be singing a blues as well at the football games.
Right.
Like, it's because it's the greatest blues, which became rock and roll. You can go anywhere in the world, and people have heard of Chuck Berry, or the great rock and roll guys who were basically playing, but they've heard of B.B. King anywhere in the world. So I've never understood why that's not more celebrated by the country that it's from. There should be statues to those guys. And because literally every kind of music that's happened since has had that in it. Until 100 years ago, music was very different than it is for most of us now. So I'm waffling now.
Yeah, no, it's great. That's why we have podcasts. This is exactly
But to try and also educate people about that element of the music, and just how important this is, and just how deeply it goes on a historical, cultural level, and people aren't even aware of that. They take it for granted. The pentatonic scale, which is the blues scale minus one note, is also found in other Chinese traditional music uses the pentatonic scale. It uses it differently, but it's like that's the first scale really that people organized as a set of notes to sing and use, and obviously the rhythm of the blues, when you start looking at it, you see how it's like spread out. It's the story of human migration, and the rhythms come from Africa, and then they go one way when they get to Cuba, they go another way when they get to the islands, and they go one way when they get to New Orleans, and it's all so related, makes you realize that there's not that much difference between a lot of these kinds of music to me either. 100 years ago, there wasn't jazz and blues. There was just black music, you know. So,
well, and that's really the thing, right? It's like it matters to you that we remember that it is Black American music, and we should be celebrating it as such, and bringing attention to that. And for some reason, that happens more in the jazz community, that have really kind of taken ownership of like wanting to make that a point, that people to pass that on to, and just to bring awareness to it. But for some reason, I guess I don't see that as much in the blues community, and it's cool that you're like, I could tell it means something to you to kind of express that, but you don't see that as much in the social media, in the ethos.
No, you don't. And it's like the first. I was just reading an article about this the other day. The first ever recorded black voice, like recorded onto acetate, as it was a female blues singer. It was the early blues singers, and which were mostly women, the singers, and we're talking about in the 20s and 30s when they first started putting stuff down. That was the first time, a black voice had been recorded, and it was a female blues singer. I mean, and who knows, who ever even thinks about that? You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
and from that, it became race music at the time, which is crazy. But especially with the way things of how all this stuff is being brought to light in society recently. Some of us have been more aware of it than others for a long time, obviously in the country. But I think it's an important time to really celebrate this gift that America has given to the world. You go anywhere in the world, and even the most bubblegum pop somewhere traces its lineage back to the harmony and the rhythmic divisions that were first started with blues and jazz. Do you know what I mean? You go all the way to, dominant seventh chords, 4 beats to a bar, organizing rhythms like that. Boom bap, boom bap.
Yeah.
Is a direct descendant of blues. It's
Seriously.
yeah.
I actually, it makes me think of that Steve Jordan quote. I'm paraphrasing. Is like, there's like basically knowing the blues is like a men and boys thing when it comes to the drums, and like a drummer who's like, has some sort of awareness of that, has put some time into those records. Like it really makes a difference in understanding groove all across the board, and like it's like, as you say, it's the foundational like music, and it's foundational groove playing. It's like you got to go, in jazz music, when you're educated on jazz, you're taught to go back and study Philly Joe and all these guys. It's no different like if you want to be a pocket drummer, that you'd want to go back and really listen to the B.B. King live and at the Cook County Jailhouse or whatever, those kind of records that are like pivotal. And
yeah, exactly. And I always say nobody's playing ever got worse by learning the blues properly. You know what I mean? Nobody ever got worse as a musician. As a way of, nobody got worse at playing with other people by understanding how you play with other people on the blues. But for some reason, it's so taken. And as we know and have experienced personally and together with other musicians, there's a lot of people who call themselves jazz musicians who don't know jack about blues. And it's like, 100%. Then you ain't really a jazz musician,
No.
Because I tell you what, you get any of the greats of all time, Oscar Peterson, Miles, anybody, they play the shit out of the blues.
Well, I actually wanted to ask you, how is, like, because I know you're a huge jazz guy, and I know, like, it's especially from the listening standpoint, you're, and how has that influenced your guitar playing, and specifically, like, what do you think you've taken from that language, from listening? It's one of those things, like when you listen to records years and years and years, and I know you've been putting some time on these records, these specific ones, the Oscar one, the live.
Yeah.
And what have you taken from it that you think you put in your playing?
I think, I never really did much transcribing, I never really did much transcribing of blues either, though. Mainly I would jam along, and pick, okay, I got to get that lick or something, but not like, I never learned whole solos note for note, just bits and pieces and then jammed back and forth. But I think with jazz stuff, just a slightly more adventurous sense of phrasing, I suppose, would be it, than you might hear. Than you might hear in blues today. But of course, if you listen to old B.B. King, his phrasing is totally the same as Louis Armstrong's or his heroes Django Reinhardt and Charlie Christian. Except he's the king of the blues. So
Right.
In a way, it's just the same as what I get from blues. Because I don't think of them as that different. Does that make sense?
Do you feel like it's heightened your sense of like swing and the idea,
sure.
like you're like, especially just from a rhythm section standpoint, like you're on the bandstand, like knowing whether it's swinging or not, because in blues, unfortunately, there's a lot of bands that are playing a shuffle and it is not swinging, and they're not aware that it's not swinging or trying to swing in the way that you think about it, which I think is more of a jazz musician's.
It is, or more of a classic traditional blues, because
Right,
that
right,
BB King Live at the Regal is swinging,
right,
you know.
right.
Yeah, 'cause
100%.
what happened to blues is, well, white people got hold of it in the late '60s,
As they
and
do.
some of that became a new kind of music, which is good in its own way. So, for example, the Rolling Stones started out as a pretty shitty blues band who kind of didn't really swing like the American guys did.
Right,
But out of that, they became the greatest rock and roll band in history,
right,
arguably. And they became their own thing. But also, other people carried on sort of playing it kind of shitty. And then the blues, I once heard it described as a refuge for hacks, because you can learn a 12 bar and then say you can play the blues and you'll accept the gig from the
right.
guy. Whereas if I got called for a Latin gig, I'd be like, well, I don't really know this music properly,
Right.
But because it's not treated with that same respect as an art form, it's been diluted with terrible versions of the art form, and then that continues to influence the art form in my opinion, negative way. So you end up with then the public's perception of this kind of music being a bad one because they only hear it played badly,
Right.
So I'm getting negative about that again. I'll stop. But to me, the jazz and blues, and even you go to New Orleans, one of my favorite places, and it's like, well, is it blues jazz or is it funk or is it,
Right.
once you get down to the heart of it, there where so much of it came from as well. It's like, well, the meters is kind of the same thing again as Oscar
Right.
or BB. Like the things that make those things great are all the same ingredients, really.
Yeah.
It's
Well, it's funny you say the meters because I was thinking it's just like like Bonham talks about like how Zigaboo was like one of his favorite drummers, like and how influential that band was on them, and it's just like maybe a casual listener wouldn't even associate Sissy Strut with one of the Zeppelin great
there you go. But the reason that what makes him great is the same thing that makes those guys great, and those are the core ingredients that apply to all the stuff that we like. And unfortunately, it seems to me often the ingredients that are missing in a lot of modern players. Not to talk shit about anyone, but it's a chops
right.
and now, or even worse, now it's do 100 takes of something for 1 minute to put it on Instagram, and that's impressive. Like, and
100%.
but I've had people sit in with me who sound great on Instagram. You come up on a shuffle with me, they sound like they can't play at all,
Right.
because and it only recently dawned on me because somebody asked me a question like online about how many takes I do on a TrueFire course when I do, when I play the piece. How many takes do I do, and do I do a few, and then do we comp it? And I'm like, takes? I'm not doing takes. We make a whole course in a day. It's like that. I'm doing what I do, which is play a good solo every time. I stand. I mean, sure, I have this. You could go, that's the best solo or that one, but I stand by every solo I've ever played.
Yeah.
And they're all improvised and they're all different. They're obviously improvised within the framework of my vocabulary, so it's not pure improvisation. But it's like, wow, we've even gone past the understanding of what it, I don't put a guitar video on Instagram every day because I don't feel that that's a good format or a good representation of what I do, which is why I don't do like this, here's today's hot lick thing,
Yeah.
because that's not what I do. And, but people don't even realize what I'm even actually doing, because they think I must have maybe composed a solo and then done all the takes for it until I got it right. And it's like, no, the whole point of what I do is getting it right at the time in the moment every time, you know. So
Well, and I feel
for
like
better or for worse.
people are going to be in for a rude awakening when they take that step if they're solely doing their thing in the world of social media and they're not out there in the world. It's going to be a shock when you got to get up there and just command a stage.
I've seen it happen.
Yeah, for a full hour, and especially if you're the lead guitar player, lead singer. I mean, it's a lot. It's like, you know, quarterbacking a football team. It's like you're leading the show, and like it, you know, it's a 60 minutes can be a really long time if it ain't going well, or it can be really fast if it's going great.
Exactly.
So it can be, you know, really. And it's funny because I know in the years, you know, when you know, kids come, like, for example, you know, a young man hits you up, like you know, he wants to hit, you know, or young man or woman wants to hit you up to sit in on your gig, and like, I get the idea behind it. I know that there's like it's not like a coming from a negative place or something, but the way it is a sort of this funny thing of like, what do you think the result of this is going to be? And I guess that kind of reminds me of this whole Instagram thing. It's like, you know,
there's a blind spot there.
There's a blind, yeah. It's like, well, of course, like, you know, it's like, why not just develop your thing, and if your hero notices you through your music, then great. But even if they didn't, like, that isn't the point. It's like, you know, and you're not going to get put on. It's not like you're gonna play a solo that's gonna blow your mind. You know, it's like, I've never heard this before. Who is this person? You know, it's like,
It's
just
I get it. I've had it a lot. People, you know, hey man, could I play a tune with you? And it's like, well, first of all, just on a basic level, what's in that for me? You know, I've got an audience that are paying good money to see me and my band play my songs and have an experience. You know.
No matter how you dream, in Lake Placid blue, Rosso Corsa, or even in black and white, we understand, and we've got what you need to make your dreams a reality. Dream loud. Head over to Walt Grace Vintage at 300 Northwest 26th Street, Miami, Florida, and pick up vintage, new, cars, guitars, all kinds of gear. Check it out.
And so to interrupt that with like, maybe this guy's going to be all right is like obviously silly anyway. But that's really what that's something I've learned in the last year is the value of what I do, and it doesn't translate on social media. It is an experience that is only had by being there and joining in with it, because the journey is slightly different every time. How, you know, we did a lot of shows, and we're playing the same set list or mixing it up a little bit, but the overall arc of the experience is slightly different every night depending on the room and the people, and that is the thing.
Right.
So it's like having great Italian food in Italy, or to me, looking at pictures of it on Instagram. Is the experience is extremely different, and I'm concerned that people are unaware of the vast difference between the experience of really doing something.
And I wonder too if that's because they're not actually going and experiencing concerts. Like, just that word itself, it's like, it's an experiential thing. Like, like if you're not going and feeling how the guitar sounds off the amp in the room with the people and the whole the energy that people together, you're missing something that is the reason why we do this anyway. And like, it's not like, you know, I'm saying this, you know, obviously, you know, I use social media. We all are.
So do I. I have to. We have
to adapt.
But it is a media channel. It's the same as the TV, you know.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, is I want.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over.
No. I just, at the end of the day, I just, you know, it's like, we want you to come to the show and hear it, the whole presentation live. Here's a snippet of what we do, and like, if you really want to support a band or understand an artist, if you're not, there's only one way to do it. And it's like, and that's probably why actors, you know, I was listening to a podcast with some of the guys from The Sopranos, and how some of them have gone back to theater, and it's like they wanted to just be in the moment, like doing it
Mhm.
live, no takes, no cuts.
Exactly.
And it's like, I'm sure for them, it's the same like concepts. Like they want to, why would someone who want to turn down millions and millions of dollars to go back to theater? Well, because the experience of it, from their perspective, is like what we get playing live. Versus
Exactly.
like, here's a snapshot. Okay, next take, guys, roll camera or whatever.
Yeah. And so you think about a movie, and that's they're still creating a full experience out
Right.
of a 2 hour film, but it's still less fulfilling for the artists involved
Right.
than say doing theatre. Well, this is why I'm like, so now we're down to a 1 minute snapshot, right,
Right.
of something, and then on to the next one, and scroll to the next one, scroll to the next one, and that is just, a million miles away from something that I find fulfilling.
Yeah.
So I can only speak for myself. And of course, I use it, I look at it, and I geek out on cool guitars on Instagram. I follow all the vintage stores and, and I mean, the gear thing is another thing that's just oddly fascinating. That's become I mean, like with my gigs, it's like dudes getting pictures of pedal boards and
Totally.
every
Yeah.
most things I post online is what are you using for that tone, but honestly the answer is me. That's what I'm using for that tone. It's like
Exactly.
my idea of how
In
it should
here.
sound is the concept of using what you have to get something that sounds good. That is the tone, having a clear idea of what you want. So that's become such a fascination. Like because when I was a kid, and I would get guitar magazines, so we're talking late 80s and early 90s guitar magazines, and you'd get an interview with one of the big tone guys, Stevie Ray or Eric Johnson. But the interview would mostly be about like the process of making the new record, or what their current tour is about, their influences, how they grew up, how they, got joined band, the other stuff. And then right at the end, they'd be like, and what guitars and amps did you use on the new record? And it would be a quick like, my old Strat, a couple of Marshalls, but it wasn't like, this. Now I'm trying these speakers, or like I'm using these cables. Right? It was just taken for granted that was okay. Basically, he uses that, and that was enough. That was enough to know that, So I mean, there's only for all the chasing of Stevie Ray Vaughan's tone, there's only like 3 pictures of his amp rig. You know what I mean? You can't find endless. There's no rig rundowns on. Nobody cared about that then. They cared about hearing him play live and in the new record that was coming out.
Right.
So it's just a major shift, which unfortunately I find myself straddling generationally, because when I started, it was still that, and and so some ways to my detriment, like you guys came up playing music, but with a more of a concept of multimedia to present it. You guys have always done videos of stuff, and
Right.
and I'm just before that.
Yeah.
So that stuff is a ball ache to me, and I actually don't feel comfortable with it. So then it doesn't happen. Flip side being, we do live in this visual world now, and so I'm lacking a great video content because it never got made.
Yeah.
So I'm caught on this kind of this gap between the first records I made were when I was playing with other people, but my first several times in the studio were onto tape, a big SSL console, and there wasn't a screen in the room. There was no monitor. There was no waveforms. It was making the record was an entirely audio experience, And if you wanted to EQ, you want to EQ something, you turn these knobs like you would on the amplifier, So I relate to that way, all the screens that are involved in everything now is like I existed and did exactly what I do before there was any of that, you know.
Right.
So,
I'm sure that I feel like that's why like analog gear, outboard gear is like coming back in a way. Like you know, just being there's something about turning the knob, like feeling it. That you know, I mean, maybe it's not coming back because I feel like digital is getting better replicating it. But I do notice, at least, you know, I see like in our scene, like Jason or any of these guys, like getting a little analog compressor or something, or tape or whatever. Like that stuff is, I feel like it's like modern again because you're looking at it like, what is this spacecraft thing? And then you could just turn the knob and the compressor sounds better than your digital version. And
yeah, it's much easier to dial in like I don't really know what I'm doing with compressors,
Right.
but if I've got one in front of me with the knobs, I can move the
And use
knobs
your
till
ear.
it sounds right. You know,
Right.
that's really hard to do with the mouse because you can't change them in the same way.
No.
And then you realize that visceral experience of it being in the physical realm. It's that gear. I can mix a record on a mixing desk much faster than I can in the box for me because I watched great lifelong engineers do that for years. I stood behind them and watched what they were doing. Doing it in the box is much more about knowing how to work a computer, actually, you know, like, and I spent 3 hours last night getting ready for this and the thing I'm doing tomorrow, a live thing, and it was all fucked up, and I'm like, oh my God, all the ins and outs have got screwed up, and, you know, and I'm like trying to just record a promo video to just, hey, come join me tomorrow, and I've only got left channel audio on QuickTime, and I'm like, oh my God, you know.
Yeah.
But you realize that stuff is the visceral, the tactile element is like an instrument as well. So
100%.
an old Neve console is an instrument.
Yeah.
You can play musically, you know, and it's not to take away from the benefits of digital stuff. And I mean, thank God for it for the last year because I don't have room for a Neve console or the money for a Neve console here. And I have been able to, you know, the most recent TrueFire course I did with everybody recorded their part at home themselves, and everybody that was involved in that until a year ago didn't have that capability, but had jumped on it at the start of the pandemic. Okay, I guess I better be able to record some stuff. You know? You guys, I've always admired it. Your creative work ethic. You know, that was something I always observed with you and Jason and Digo, and your scene in general is you guys are always banging out tunes and recording, and because that being able to do it yourself element,
was like a requirement just to get in. It was like a bar of entry. Yeah.
So whereas for me it's like I guess I better join the club, you know.
Well, and you're sitting on, you know, records that were made in that way that there's a richness, and they've carried you to a point, whereas we're trying to put this out in the midst of this oversaturated market just to break through to a light like this dirt patch, and we're just trying to keep pushing stuff and that's kind of like it's like it's like an adaptive response to how the market changed. I mean,
yeah, it is,
you know,
and so I have an eternal wrestle with it of like, should I stay my ground, you know,
right,
and just be what I am fully, you know, you know, or do I compromise and embrace it for my own benefit in a way, you know, in the current market, but it's sort of like dilute. How much do I dilute it? How much do I, is there a benefit to not doing that stuff? You know, like, cause I'm like, Derek Trucks doesn't post lick of the day every day on his Instagram page from his bedroom. You know, he doesn't do that.
Right.
Eric Clapton doesn't do that. I'm not suggesting I'm those guys, but it is ultimately a choice between what kind of artist you want to be and how much any of that represents your art and how suitable the medium is. And, you know, it's all compromises. But I can tell you, you know, if I have any kind of budget to work with at all, I wouldn't have bothered with this in my house, and it would still be going down to Criteria, and we'd go in a room and jam it out for 2 weeks until it sounds good. You know,
totally. And you know, I mean, maybe, and I think that process just makes the music different too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like you say, it's like you have to adapt to whatever medium you're going to choose. You got to try to make it represent your work. And the whole lick of the day thing isn't representing anything. It's not even related to art. It's not even, it's like, it's just the athletic performance side of it, you know, which is, that's the problem is with the visual is you're too focused on, and I actually feel like I've had to overcome my own, what's the word to say? Like, I'm a very visual person. So I get kind of obsessive with how a drummer holds his sticks or sets up his kit, like, to a downfall, because that gets in my system, and sometimes subconsciously those thoughts can become interruptions in your own playing flow because the minutia comes and interrupts, and that's what people I feel like don't understand. Maybe it's like, well, maybe they do. It's like whatever you're taking in, that's what you're going to put out. So it's. You know, I feel like there is something to be said for like forcing ourselves sometimes. It's like if we like to get back into those more old school ways, or just like, okay, let's just get in a room, put the mics on and see what that does musically for us.
Exactly. And ultimately, you know, music still is an audio experience.
Right. It's supposed to be.
It's become entangled with visual, you know, and I know exactly what you're saying. It's like, when I was a kid, you know, Stevie Ray Vaughan had his hands look really beautiful on the guitar. You know, he had these beautiful big hands that they just looked like they were made for the guitar. The way he holds the guitar, and you were like, I'm thinking, you know, it affects the fingerings that you play, you know, because you want it to look as fluid. You know, that's appealing, right? And but I'm thinking he wasn't thinking about how B.B. King's hands looked on the guitar. Do you know? Right. I mean, so that was the first step to where we are now. And then now it's only how it looks. You know. But it's well, I've forgotten. I've lost my train of thought now. But the audio experience. That's right. I was when people started filming everything. You know, 10, 15 years ago, when it became cameras out at the gigs, you know. Yeah. And a Robin Ford gig, and the guy, he hates that so much, right? I've seen him shoo people away with his foot, literally from the front of the stage with the camera. And he stops between the tune and he just says to the guy, "You can't see music, man." And I never forget that sentence. You know, you can't see music, man. Put it away. Put it away.
It's really true.
And all this, I've had people stood with iPads in front of their face to film me on an iPad, and I'm looking at the back of an iPad, and it's like, you know, you're missing the opportunity to experience what this really is, and there's no way you can record the thing that it really is. Right. So it's a futile attempt, you know. There's no way you can record the experience, but you can miss it by attempting to. So I'll stop moaning about that stuff one day. That's just the way it is. But I've just been learning and listening to some stuff about the two sides of the brain recently. You know, as you know, so that kind of thing is interesting to me. The science and we're becoming increasingly left-brained, the world, you know, and this inability to enjoy the moment, you know, we're so consumed with stuff, and then that filters into the rest of your life, I think, you know. It filters into your relationships and your interactions with other people, and I feel like social media's like filtering into real world reactions now, how people treat each other, you know, and
seriously.
I don't know. So in some ways, I'm fine tucked away here in you know, like it's fine as well.
That's actually a good segue, because I wanted to tell you a story of something that was told to me, and I want to get your immediate visceral reaction, and I also my follow-up question to how it relates to how you came up playing guitar, and maybe how you see, you know, advice for young musicians coming up. But the story is basically, we were on tour in Europe, right?
Yeah.
And I was talking to Simon, and he's telling me about the first time he met you, because I'm asking him. So and he tells me, he's like, the first time he comes into the store to buy guitar strings, and the way Simon says it is like, and Matt asked me, what are the strings Stevie Ray Vaughan uses or something like that, and Simon says, like, he was thinking to himself, who is this this dweeb?
I was young, man.
Yeah,
I was
like 15, 13, right? And he was like, and he sat down and played and he was just sounded devastating already. And it was just funny the way he was telling it. And, it obviously that moment was like, brought a lot out of him. Like, he was in awe, but also it was the beginning of your relationship. So when you hearing that, what does it make you think when you think back to that time and like coming to the guitar in those early days, now being multiple decades into this thing?
It's actually 30 years next month since I did my first performance on stage for other people. It was at school, but the band played, pretty much what I still do. So it's basically 30 years in April. So that would have been around the time that and by the way, that first gig, I didn't even have an electric guitar. So I was gigging before I had an electric guitar, because and this is something I've realized as well in the world, having done the True Fire stuff, I've come to realize that it's a world of backing tracks and people playing along to backing tracks and stuff at home. My experience of learning to play, in a way, I don't even really remember how I in a lot of ways, because it was kind of like I figured out the blues scale, but because I wasn't attempting to learn exactly people's licks, I found the sound in the blues scale and started improvising with it immediately, because I was listening to the music and I knew how I wanted it to sound, so I found those sounds within the one scale. I immediately could make music out of the very small vocabulary that I had. So instead of learning the massive vocabulary and not knowing what to do with it, I started with a very small vocabulary and started making music with it instantly. So within about 6 months of getting serious about it, I had a band. And then the experience for me was always in the context of playing with other musicians from moment one. So it wasn't for me to just be in my bedroom. It was, we got the band together at school, guys I still keep in touch with, lifelong friends, who all went on to not do this, but nonetheless, they loved music very much as well. We would spend every hour after school every day from the age of 13 until, as many hours as we could after school. And then both weekend days, jamming all day. And so most of what I learned in the context of doing it with other people at the same time. And so I'm not just learning guitar in a vacuum. I'm listening to music and taking it and then creating our own attempt at that with a small vocabulary. So the beauty of the blues is that you don't need a huge vocabulary to play it well, but you do need to understand what as I often say as well, simple does not mean easy. They're not the same things, So, go back to Italian food again. They can do something with just pasta, oil, a few chili flakes, and it's one of the best dishes you've ever had. And give it a go yourself, and it won't be as good. You know what I mean? So,
Totally.
Simple doesn't mean easy. But that's really, really important, is that I had enough vocabulary to work from. I knew what I wanted it to sound like, and then I started doing that with other people. So that's how I came to it. And
did you know, like, at that point early on, that you had a proclivity for it, or was it through people like Simon who were older than you, who were also players, being like, "Oh shit, who is this kid?" And did that affect your outlook on how you wanted to do it, or did
probably? I mean, there was an element of when you're a kid, you're not thinking about the world as what you can't do. Do you know? You're like, so there was. I know there was no reason for me to think that I couldn't do it. I wasn't like, oh, and I do remember, this is the thing, from that moment when I set the band up, we were the band at school. It wasn't a big school. It was in the countryside, and you've been to Gloucestershire, to the Cotswolds.
Yeah.
Brexit happened, we were all there. That's where it was.
What a trip, man.
Yeah. But so we were the band, and from that moment, people said, well, of course you're going through like vocational things at school and careers, and what subjects you're going to do to go to university, and that's the plan that's put in place for you. And I would, from the beginning, I'm going to play. I'm a blues guitarist, and people took me seriously to some degree. I mean, of course, there was some of my teachers at school were like, "Okay, but you need something to fall back on." But I said, "No, I don't." And I was lucky that my mum was fully supportive. I mean, she'd have rather I'd been a lawyer, perhaps back then, or whatever, something. But she also didn't say no way. You're not. She said, "Well, you need to do what you're going to make you happiest with your life." So she was incredibly supportive, regardless of whether she thought it was a good idea or not,
Yeah.
And so I was lucky to have that. I wasn't told that I had to go to university, even though I was more than capable academically of doing that. So then I moved to London instead of going to university and joined a band. And I often say this to people, not to say that going to Berkeley or something here isn't a good idea, but for what that's going to cost your parents, you might be better just going to the city in this country that has the kind of scene that you would like to be part of, and having them just spend the money on renting an apartment for 2 years for you instead of paying for Berkeley for 2 years for you.
100%.
It might be money better spent, or certainly not worse spent. And if after those 2 years you're not working in this town, then maybe a music career isn't for you, because you can go to Berkeley, spend all that money. It's like a soft way of trying to become a professional musician that keeps the parents happy because you get a certificate at the end of it, But to me, it's like it doesn't really mean shit, It's like, so that just bringing it around to advice for people is you have to do it with other people to find out if you can keep the gig, right?
Yeah. Well, and that'll be the quickest way you'll find out. Is it a steady gig, and did you get called the next week?
Yeah. So it might be cheaper to go find out that way than pay for 3 years or whatever it is for a Berkeley,
which is
course,
crazy expensive to begin with.
Exactly. So go.
You're gonna pay that debt off with your musician payments for the next 30. I mean, that's the other thing too. It's like, what do you think the turnaround on the investment is in terms of financial gain? Even if you start working a lot, you're just going to be working enough, unless you have a big break or something, or you're very lucky, or you're a virtuoso that gets recognized. You're going to be paying your rent, paying for food, and you're hoping that next week is going to be just as busy.
Yeah, so that's it. You may as well just go straight to that. And if you can hack it, and if you can make it work, and if you don't get fired, then there might be a future for you.
Was that when you were in London? Sorry, real quick, just to segue real quick. When you went to, was that band the first band you joined there with Johnny and with Evan?
No, Johnny I played with towards the end of being at school. We went to the same school, and I was very close friends with at the time with his older brother, who was a guitarist. So me and his older brother moved to London together, and so James, Johnny's brother. So Johnny was still finishing school. He's a couple of years younger than me. And we moved down to London and started hitting the pro jams there. And there was a pretty reasonably healthy blues scene. This is the 97, I'm talking about 96, 97, where there were kind of real jams with a good house band, and then other American touring artists would come to that jam on a Monday night and show up. So you got to jam with the real people. It was it was the place to go. This place called the Weavers in Islington. So, but within a few times of going to that jam, I got offered a gig to join a band with a British harmonica player called Lee Sankey, who's an incredible harmonica player. And so, yeah, my first gig was at the 100 Club in London, which is a legendary club that I have played many times since with my own band, and was going to play again possibly this year, but all of that was cancelled. So I'm like maybe just turning 19 at this point, because I spent a bit of time over here traipsing around before I moved to London after I finished school. So the first year of being 18, I was driving in an old Chevy van around the US for several months. But then when I went back, so I got that gig pretty quickly, and it's like, okay, I'm doing it. I'm in a band, and playing the 100 Club, which is one of the venues, like I say, that I still play now. So it just kind of went from there, and I learned a lot by being a sideman as well for other people. I'd say in both what to do and what not to do.
From that point, when did you form what would become the first? I call it the OG trio, but the first Matt Schofield trio, and then and then you recorded the live record first or the studio record. I can't remember.
So we were touring I was touring and gigging regularly with other bands. So I got, along with a harmonica player band, I got in a kind of more of a working sort of club date band that played mostly blues, but a bit broader, and do the odd wedding and things like that. It was broad enough to do that with this guy Dino Baptiste, boogie woogie piano player. And so that I met Evan Jenkins on that gig, because Evan took over the drum chair on that gig as a kind of a working, so that we were gigging quite a lot, doing different kinds of shows. And then both me and Evan ended up in Dana Gillespie's band. She's a long, her career goes back to the mid '60s. So then we started touring Europe with her. Dino was the keyboard player in the band, so we ended up in that. So then I'm like, I remember going home from the first gig with Evan, and it was somebody's wedding in a like castle in Wales, and he was subbing the gig. And I said to James, Johnny's brother, who we were all sharing a flat at the time, I said, I think I just found my drummer tonight, because he played the most like I wanted somebody to play that I'd ever played with at that point of being maybe 20 years old, so maybe 19 or something. And so then out of that, I started a band with my girlfriend at the time, who was a singer, and we got Johnny playing keys. So now we're at like the year 2000. So it was me, Evan, Johnny, the singer, and a bass player called Jeff Walker, who had been on the scene a bunch. And then I split up with that girlfriend, so you know how bands go with that. And then the bass player couldn't do the gig one night, and Johnny had been really working on his real B3 playing by this point of playing bass. So we just did a gig I think we went there when we were in London, the Ain't Nothing But the Blues Bar. We definitely walked past it because we had a coffee right next door, which was a hole in the wall, like a juke joint blues place in London, where they had a blue light on the wall if you played over.
I remember this.
Decibels, the PA would shut off if you got too loud.
That's amazing.
So we were playing there like maybe once a week and starting to get a following. People were coming specifically to hear us as the trio. And then we had a great gig one night, and it was like a major football match on, but it was still rammed in there. So that's a good indicator if people are coming to see you instead of the soccer game.
Especially in London.
Yeah, and so then I got a call from the owner the next day who said, the manager said you tripped the light last night and it was too loud. And I said, did he say how full it was? You know what I mean? It's like nobody was complaining, let's put it that way, right?
Yeah.
So he goes, well, I can't have you playing that loud. And I'm like, well, you know what? I am not playing that loud. And to have to subdue the intensity of the music anymore would be a disservice to what we're doing. And also, you know, the reason why people are coming out to see us is because we're doing what we do, you know? So if I have to adjust that for you, then that's wrong. So it was kind of like, you're fired, you can't fire me, I quit kind of thing. So I lost that gig, you know?
Yeah.
So then I was like, man, this band is onto something though. So I contacted another venue that I'd played with the previous band with the singer, and that guy said, sure, we'd love to have you. So we went up and did one there, and that guy was like, you know, we should record something and I'll help you get some more shows, like a demo. And so he sort of became a manager of sorts. So we went back a few months later and recorded what is now the Trio Live. So that's 2003. We recorded that. And but we were still all playing in other people's bands. So that first record, a lot of people still go, that's my favorite record. I'm literally turning to Johnny and saying, shuffle and C, you know, and we play it.
Sometimes
and
that's when the magic happens, though, right?
Yeah. So it's a total jam on songs that we kind of knew, or just some blues. And we picked the best 8 tracks that really had some action going on. And at that point, we were like, wouldn't it be cool if we kind of had a band that was like Robin Ford and the Blue Line, where everybody's playing their ass off? It's different than like B.B. King and his orchestra, but this is like a power trio, except it's an organ trio. So that was the concept. There was to be like a kind of progressive blues organ trio. And of course, there's a Meters song on the record. There's a Soul Live song on the record, which we thought was great because it was all just cool to us. We put it out, and the British blues magazines reviewed it. The first review was like, it's too jazzy.
Classic.
Like, has anybody listened to B.B. King?
Yeah.
Or is now the metric for blues of, you know, how much it's like I don't know, Eric Clapton or Stevie Ray or something?
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's like that as well, but it's just also not like. Of course, now that's what most of modern blues sounds like. You know, you go on, all the guys on Instagram that play it are all playing more sophisticated lines and arrangements. But honestly, in the UK, when we did that, we were the odd ones out. There was a bit of pushback.
Yeah.
But we were the band that all the other bands would come and watch on the festival. You know, so we'd have
maybe
them
that's how
all.
it has to be sometimes. Like, there's always the innovative cats always kind of get that pushback in the beginning when you're doing something that people they want to have you their blues
They
box.
do. And for years, it was like, why don't you have a real bass player? And I'm like, we do have a real bass player.
Oh, don't get me started. You know, I can.
Of course, you know.
That's hilarious.
And by the way, you wouldn't even know on the record that you're not thinking about it till you see us. So what you're listening to on the record is exactly the same as what we're doing on stage, but your eyes say, why don't they have a bass player? Right. You didn't notice on the record because we do have a bass player. Bass is a register, not an instrument.
Sorry, Digo.
Well, but Digo plays his Moog and stuff.
That's true. That's true.
It's a register. It's a set of frequencies, man. You know.
Actually, I want to ask you. So, how did that band then? How did the record label relationship begin? Like, how does that even happen? Coming out of in this situation of like a very live sort of oriented group.
Well, yeah. So we were like. We made it with the idea of sending it out as almost demo to venues on the British blues scene and stuff. And then Richard Pavitt, the guy who set up New Gene Records, which is still going these days. I haven't been with it for nearly 10 years now, but he set that up to release that record and actually get it out there. And so then, it was a classic kind of 50-50. He'll do the music and... so we'll do the music and he'll book some shows, kind of manage it, get the record released, do the business side of things. And that worked great for a while. I have to say, I'm very grateful to Richard, even though we haven't spoken in many years because we didn't part on the best of terms. But I hold nothing but a lot of gratitude that he got the ball rolling, and yes, after a while, it became clear to me that I needed a different setup. The 50-50 is great until you know you the you I couldn't keep up with the level of financially with the level with the speed he wanted to move my career, if you see what I mean. So
Right.
he's pushing to, we've got to make another record. It's going to cost this much, and we've got to do this. But ultimately, I'm paying for it still.
Right.
So I couldn't keep up. So I had to jump ship on that. But so we put the live one out. It was all covers, just 8 tracks, and then it was like, well, I guess we better make a proper record.
Yeah.
So then we did it, and it's like, oh shit, I got to write some songs. I better see if I can sing a bit better on this, And off we go, and it was a record every 18 months or so for the next 10, 11, 12 years. Yeah. So
it is fascinating too, because you came at the time right when sort of the record label industry was going the other way. And did that
Right.
have a big effect, do you think, on wanting to kind of move on from that relationship in general, and how it
Definitely.
the structure of
Yeah.
it was with sort of an archaic mindset, because everything evolved so quick, it was almost like no one
did.
could see what was coming.
I think it's very important. I mean, like my first studio record, I'm pretty sure I sold more physical copies of that when nobody knew who I was than by the time I did my last record. I'm not even kidding. Even though many more
It's wild.
people accessed the music than by the time I'd made my 5th album, many more people were coming to see me live. I've played in 30 different countries as a headline artist now. So I'm around the world now, but that's not selling as many physical copies as the first one did, because in 2005 it was buy a CD, order the CD. So,
Yeah.
and simple as that. And yeah, there was Napster starting, and at that point, it was like only Metallica had figured it out at that point that this was going to change things. Everybody was like, they're being assholes, including me. I'm like, because there I am, like starting to, I'd got my first computer in the year 2000. So you think how close that is. 2005 was my first year. In 2003, I've only owned a computer and had an email address for 3 to 5 years
Wow.
at that point. So, and then by 2010, we've got iPhones, we got YouTube. So yeah, I definitely fell prey actually to the period in the industry. Perhaps if I'd have put a solo record out 5 years earlier than I did, I might have been able to establish a bit more of a foothold on the industry with the traditional method of make an album, market it, get a
Right.
PR guy, do the tour, So it's been difficult to navigate for sure, and it's one of the reasons that I haven't put a solo record out in a while. I have one in the bag actually with the trio with Johnny and Evan. We went back and did something else a couple of years ago, but there's a lot of burnout from it for me, because the carrot was always dangling in front of me, and
Right.
2010. I had enough of a renown and reputation to be granted a US visa. So you can't just get a US visa. So I couldn't tour here until 2010 because you have to be, my official status in this country is an alien of extraordinary ability. That's what my...
I like that
So-
title. Maybe that should be
I
a
swear-
record. Maybe that should be the name of a record.
Yeah, I swear to God, it's a O1B, alien of extraordinary ability. And the O1A is the science version,
Right.
the Milano one, which you got, the Einstein visa.
Hey,
But,
I wanna real quick. I just wanted to
yeah.
go through some rapid fire stuff here.
Yeah, sorry, because otherwise I won't shut up,
No. I just don't want to run out of time and get cut off.
Gotcha.
Okay. So top 5 blues records.
Virtually impossible. You should have told me you asked it in advance.
You said you wanted to go off the cuff. That's amazing. I was. You told me off the cuff. I was like, all right, I'm coming for your ass.
I know.
They don't
Why
have to
didn't
be
you
in
ask-
order.
No. Just I mean, obviously, you gotta have Live at the Regal from BB. I think you gotta have Born Under a Bad Sign by Albert King. Um, yeah, and then it starts to get really, really hard. I love Burglar by Freddie King, although it's not really a blues record. Stone Crazy by Buddy Guy, which is the 6-track album called Stone Crazy, recorded in the late 70s in France, is like avant-garde blues madness that dynamics have never been captured on a record in such a way. It's incredible, but it's not an easy listen. It's not like the first one that you'd want to go to. Obviously, I have to throw something in by Stevie because he was so important to me. So definitely maybe In Step, but almost anything by any of those guys. Albert Collins as well. If you
only got five, Matt. You only got five.
That's six. All right. They'll do, you know? But it'd be different tomorrow as well, you know. So.
Okay, now what about top 5 funk records? Now, you obviously could put Burglar in that, but we're gonna leave that in the blues, so that gives you an opening.
But it would go in funk as well.
It would
sure.
for both, for sure.
Anything by the Meters, you know, anything. I like James Brown live at Olympia in Paris. That would be definitely in there. Sly In Time, you know. Now I'm racking my brains to think of
Where's my T.O.P.?
Oh, of course. Wait, right, there you go. Of course. Yeah. Now I'm trying to think of all these
How
records.
How many times did we listen to Soulvax live?
Right, Squib Cakes.
Squib Cakes.
Exactly. Yeah. Squib Cakes is the one. Ebony Jam, I like that one as well. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you could any of those great early Tower records, as long as it's Chester, Rocco, and Garibaldi, then you're getting what you need. Yeah, of course, then. Yeah, so
two more funk records.
Two more. Isn't it one more?
Is it one more? We're not mathematicians here, folks.
Yeah, I know. Now I can't think of anyone now. So.
That's good enough. All right, I got another one for you. Okay.
I don't know if it's a funk record or what it is, but Yellow Moon by the Neville Brothers.
Oh yeah. That's great.
It is funk, but
it's definitely funky.
Neville Brothers music. It's New Orleans music, but you know, in the production with Daniel Lanois, and there's no crash cymbals for most of the record. Something interesting thing to think about. There's no 12K on the top of the album. So it's
really,
yeah.
Kick, snare, hi-hat operation.
Yeah, not even hat really. It's like percussion, the whole thing. It's worth listening to with that in mind. There's no ever, you know. It's all, you know.
So it's warmer that way.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to do a word association game with you. I'm gonna say the name of a blues artist, and the first thing you think of is what you say. Are you ready? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Everything. He's everything that it is. Yeah. He's the top of. He's everything that came before him. He took. Yeah.
Okay.
So he's like the complete. There's the word complete.
B.B. King.
Yeah. OG.
Love it.
The OG. Hands down.
Albert Collins.
Just excitement, energy, you know, just everything good, just passion, you know, good.
Okay.
Like
Albert King.
Power. Just straight up power, yeah.
That's an easy one for a one word.
It is, because it's just like, you know, realize, just to touch very quickly on what we were talking about right at the start, but he plays and sounds like you will know his name. Do you know what I mean? Because that was where these guys came from, on plantations and stuff. To then have the world know your name, that's why, you know, you will know my name when you hear me, and you will remember me as an individual, you know, human being. That's how he sounds to me. Like,
straight up.
I'm not going to forget this. So,
okay, yeah. Freddie King,
just groovy, just funky, but in the context of blues, but just like boogie, you know? But, yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
All right, two more. Robin Ford.
Oh, yeah, I lost you there for a second.
Sorry, Robin Ford. Two more.
Rolling forward, sophistication, actually touch. There's a delicate nature to his playing that wasn't sort of represented in the same way, and yet previous to him, and yet still being really in the spirit of blues.
Lastly, John Schofield.
Yeah. Oh man, just unique. Like his individuality as a player, and so yeah, just a voice on the instrument. I would say that that's what's hugely inspiring. But I've never tried to play like him, but I hope one day to be like him. In as much as who else could be playing what he plays? He's the very definition of an artist like that. And that's very much in the spirit of the blues as much as anything else, of having a sound that you own. So yeah, there you go.
100%. And real quick for the gear nerds,
Yeah.
just wanted to talk pedal board first. You've been using the Fine Finish Mad Professor pedal for a long time.
Yeah. The good lads, Harry and the gang over there. Yeah, man. So the Supreme pedal, we worked on that one together. I've been trying to get it down to just the bare bones, like because all those guys we just talked about, they weren't even using any pedals most of the time, including John Schofield, who's obviously has done all kinds of cool stuff with effects. But last time I saw him, he was straight into the amp, So trying to get it closer to that, so we worked on the pedal so that I could be closer to that, and in as much as I have all the sounds I might need with one press of a button, So really happy with that one, and I just used their delay as well, And that's pretty much it, pedals wise, although I'm actually sat here, if you could see to my left, laying out a huge recording board that I have all my other drives on, so that I can just pick them on the fly when I'm, trying to get a track. So there's a bunch of stuff from my friends at Vemirim in Tokyo, and Jesse Davy Kingtone, and my old Free to Tone stuff from those guys, and the famous Klon Centaur, which I look at every day going, man, they're selling for $5,000 now, but I've got it in case this pandemic goes on a bit too much longer.
In case zombies start coming out.
I've still got the Klon, and so that's my retirement fund or something.
That's amazing. Yeah. That won't last you very long these days, Matt. That's not going to be a very good retirement.
No, but I only paid $275 for it. In fact, Simon bought like 3 of them. I don't think I paid for it at all. So, he ordered 3 of them brand new, Beautiful. And now they're going for $5,000. So it's not bad in like 10, 12 years or something.
Hey, it's pure profit, baby. Oh man, what about guitars? I know you're not a big switcher on stage like some cats, but you will from time to time. Just once. Yeah. Just one guitar extra.
I like getting into what I'm using and just playing music. It's like Oscar Peterson played one piano all night. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Who was when we played at Copper Mountain? Who was the headliner? I forget. Steve Vai, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many guitars? No, that's where we gotta get you. That's where we gotta get you, man. We gotta cart you out the row of 7.
Yeah. And I went through an early phase with that before Simon was like doing sound. He would be like doing the classic guitar tech thing if stood at the side. And I would take a Strat. He had a wonderful old late 60s Telly, and I would have my Tokai 335, and I would switch between the 3. But then at some point I'm like, I just want to play, and if I'm digging what I'm doing, then it's up to me. So I streamline that. But, obviously I've been playing my old 61 original one a lot. That doesn't travel very often. So that's still the benchmark. And of course, Simon's guitars for the last decade, have been my go-to touring instruments. And then more recently, JJ Guitars is back here as well. My friend, you remember our man Jeff Guilford? You know,
Man,
how could I
can't
not
forget
love
him.
how could I not love Jeff's guitars as
No.
well, right?
Yeah.
When they're made from the hands of that gentleman, you know.
He's the
So
man.
one of my favorite people, and you know.
He is a
So
special cat.
he is. So he makes special guitars, you know. So
Beautiful.
they're always around, and a chap from up in Port St. Lucie here, actually, who's become the guy that works on my guitars here. You know, it took me a long time to find anyone on this side of the pond without Simon. Simon's been the only person since for like 30 years, you know. So I got introduced to a guy up here, and so he does Marty. He does some stuff, and he's he built this prototype thing that's kind of an interesting Strat, but it's got like a Gibson style neck joint. It's sort of a set neck Strat rather than a bolt on, you know.
Yeah.
And so I haven't even been able to try it on a gig, you know, because we haven't had one. So I never know how anything is until I've used it in battle. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Until I've stood next to your cymbals as a frame of reference,
Right.
you know,
Especially when we're really going.
Exactly.
You know?
So I can tell from things like that what I can get out of this instrument, what it's useful for, or what it excels at, you know.
100%.
Yeah, and then of course the Two-Rock amps, you know, which that's been 16 years now. I've been using those things, and they're better than ever since Eli came on board over there, you know. But I've been friends with Mac from actually my first US tour. He came down to the gig, brought a prototype amp, said take it with you on the rest of the tour, check it out, let us know what you think. So that was 2010, but I'd already been playing them for 5 years. But me and Mac hit it off over there, and then Eli came in and really took the whole thing to another level. And he was a friend anyway before anybody had any idea that he was going to take over the company. And he was one of the guys I did let sit in, actually.
Yeah, he's a good guitar player.
Yeah, so that was the deal there. And so yeah, I don't even look for stuff anymore. Do you know what I mean? I get loads of messages on the gram from pedal companies and stuff. Hey man, we'd love to send you some stuff. And I'm like,
send them to Digo. Tell them you gotta redirect.
Exactly. You know, and I don't feel good taking stuff because it's going to go on this shelf that I have over here and probably not get used. And especially when I'm not gigging, you know, I might throw it up on a sound check, and again, you see what it does in battle.
Yeah.
But I really don't need any of that. I need a universal audio endorsement is what I need at the moment. You know what I mean? Because I've been using the aux thing here because I can't. The one time I used the amp to any any level of volume to try and record something in here, I got a phone call within 10 minutes from the gatehouse at the condo security saying, "Sir, are you playing the guitar over there?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's what I do." They're like, "Oh, somebody's trying to put the baby to sleep," and I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like, I can't even do 10 minutes with the
That's
amp."
amazing.
It was like 8:30 at night, but it wasn't midnight. Do you know? You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
no, that's bullshit.
I'm
Sound
like, you
ordinance.
tell them that people actually pay to hear this most of the time. Not tell me to stop playing.
Well, Matt, it's been a pleasure, man. And
Yeah,
we got to
man,
do it again. I got more
Yeah.
for you.
Oh, for sure. It's nice to talk to anyone at all. But, no, it's been
Absolutely.
great. It's been great, man. I appreciate you letting me freeform ramble about this stuff.
I love
you
it,
know?
man. I love it. I'm glad I have a platform to get you on here talking, man. Because I've gotten so many great bits of being in the van, being on stage. But it's cool to be able to kind of get out what is also that I've received, from you and from all these other people on this platform. So it's great. Thank you for coming on.
And vice versa. I have, those were such great couple of years where we were really going hard on the road and stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I appreciate all all that you guys dedicated to that and brought to it, and how much that you cared about doing it well, because
Hell yeah.
that's not always the case. So I was really something for me to witness that and benefit from it, and that was actually one of the most successful lineups that I've ever managed to keep together for any amount of time. So and also very popular with my fans. People will always mention it, and we'll do it again, as you know, with me for sure. If I've called you back for a second gig, then at some point I'll call you back for a gig. I mean, that's the way it works. Once you've got the gig, you've always got the gig. It's one of you become one of the cyclic people in my small list of always calls. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, I'll hold you to that, man. Look forward to it.
I want you guys to know that. It's for sure, man.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, and yeah, man, we'll talk soon.
All right. Take it
Cheers,
easy.
my friend.
Stay well, everyone. Cheers, Digo.
Yeah.